Hello, ladies, sisters. I'm here to talk about domestic violence awareness. As you know, with all the purple and the pink, we're here with two specific themes to focus on today. And today, the purple is for domestic violence awareness. And so I'm going to share with you a little bit about my story, and I'm going to give you some facts and some information. But first, I want to start off with when I was praying earlier this week, God gave me the word unlikely. Didn't really understand why he gave me that word, but I do now. And I'll go into that a little bit later on in the message. So first, let me start off by giving you a little bit of information about myself. My name is Chenois. Some of you know me by my middle name, Joy. I actually was a foster child. I grew up in Washington, D.C., and I was a ward of the court. For my entire childhood, I lived in an abusive home. So basically, by the time I got to the foster care system, I was already in junior high. I was already a teenager. So my entire childhood, which are those formative years, you know, how many of you know when you're younger, that's when you make all your perceptions and things about anything, relationships, just life in general. You gain so much through those younger years. So during my younger years, I was exposed to a lot of abuse and neglect. My father was, he was a public success, but really in a personal or behind closed doors, a private failure with his family. And nobody really believed the things that he did because he was such a huge success. I mean, I'm talking about films, work with people like Muhammad Ali, and photography for Martin Luther King, and just he was a huge figure, and he was also a local professor. So it was really hard for people to believe what was going on in my house. So I grew up with that. By the time he got to court, my father was charged with mental, physical abuse and neglect, and sexual abuse. My mother was charged with physical abuse and neglect. And so finally, here I am, 13 years old, and I finally get into wonderful foster families. I had two foster families who were in the same church at the time. And they really just changed my whole life. However, all the stuff that I learned in the beginning of the years, you know, my years, it was still there. I had counseling, and but how many of you know sometimes you have to fix both the heart and the mind? And sometimes, you know, it's not necessarily what you know, but it's what you believe. And so for a long time, I didn't believe certain things about myself, which led me into other abusive relationships as an adult. So I'm here to talk to you about domestic violence. Firstly, I'm so passionate about domestic violence because of what I saw happen to my mother. And then I'm passionate about it because of what happened to me. And so I had to say the buck stops here. So let me tell you a couple of things about what happened to me as a result of being abused. My self-esteem, which is how I look at myself, as well as some self-respect, which is how I treat myself and the others treat me, was shot. It was gone. And, you know, people would say, oh, you look so nice on the outside. You know, we could put on makeup and a pretty smile, but inside we could be just dying, literally. And that's how I was for a very long time. I let other people tell me about love instead of knowing for myself what love is. And that's one of the most important points I want to express to you today, is abuse is really just not knowing what love is. Because if you stay in a relationship that is harmful, expecting love, it's confusion. It's confusion. That's not love. So I let other people tell me about love. I let other people say they love me, even though I didn't feel like I was receiving love. And they would say they love me, but I'm like, this doesn't feel like love. This is hurtful. And I didn't know myself. I didn't sit down and say, you know, what is love? Well, thankfully, I got saved around a time when I was with one of my foster families, and I realized that God is love. But I still had to mature in that understanding. I had a lot of rejection to deal with. And rejection will will cause you to think that you are unlovable. That's what rejection does. That's that word unlikely. So if somebody treated you horribly, they verbally abused you, they mentally abused, they physically abused you. And physical abuse doesn't have to be like what we see on TV with, you know, getting knocked out cold on the floor. It could be a push. It could be a shove. It could be a slap. It doesn't have to be extremely violent as a stabbing or a gun. Sometimes we minimize physical abuse, but abuse is abuse. Emotional abuse, the strain of just playing with your mind. Like, for instance, I think you're gaining weight. You lose weight. Well, you still don't look like you used to. Or, I don't like that dress on you. You put on another dress. Well, no, that's not it either. Nothing you do is ever good enough. Always putting you down. That's that emotional strain. And I'll go through a couple of other points. Abuse is a trap of giving more love than what you actually receive. I'm going to say that again. Abuse is the trap of giving more love than what you receive. So you have to trust your deposit. It's not about what you're giving. It's about what you're receiving as well. Because you can love someone and love someone and love someone until they kill you. That's not it. So if you look at it like a bank account, right? So I say, hey, I put a deposit in your account the other day for $1 million. And you just go out and start spending money. But you didn't check your account. What's going to happen? Overdrawn. And that's what happens with abuse. You just overdrawn. You overspent yourself trying to make things work, trying and hoping and wishing and praying that there was a change. There's nothing you can do to change anybody. They have to want to change themselves. And you could love somebody from a distance, and you could love somebody from a safe place. Abuse is going through great lengths to gain attention and affection from someone who is emotionally unavailable. They're hurtful. They're harmful. They put you in harm's way. And if they can't get to you anymore, they'll get to your children. They'll get to your pets. They'll get to your employment. They'll find ways to get to you because abuse is all about control and manipulation and fear and torment. There's no fear in love. So a person who has nothing to give you and doesn't want anything you have to give, what kind of relationship is that? That's what domestic violence is. You're never good enough. You never find yourself happy in a relationship. Let me tell you a couple of things. There might be change and there might be glimmers of hope, but let me explain to you the cycle of abuse really quickly. The first stage is tension building, where all of a sudden you get this anxiety and tensions increase and you feel fearful all of a sudden that something's going to happen, but you really just don't know. There's the incident of actual abuse. And as a result of that, you get blamed for the abuse. You're the reason why he had to hurt you. Because, well, if you didn't do this, then I wouldn't have to do this. And how many know that's error? There's threats and intimidation during that stage. Well, after that is the reconciliation. It's when the abuser apologizes, and he'll give excuses. Blames you some more, denies that the abuse ever occurred, denies it, and will get people on his side. Then there's the calm phase, where the incident is forgotten, and the abuse is no longer taking place. This is called the honeymoon phase, because everything seems lovely. But what's next? You're back to one, because a cycle is a circle. And that's why I say it's a trap. And also, you could be re-victimized just by your own personal thinking. Because after a while, you get comfortable, because if you've been abused all your life, that's what you're used to. And you get comfortable, and you start saying, okay, well, I'm not comfortable for this guy who's this kind of quiet and nice and, charming. Oh, well, this guy has a little more action and adventure. I'm going over here. You get comfortable with that. And that's how you have to renew your mind. And I have to say this. I tell my daughter a lot, now she's in high school with boyfriends and things. You don't want to practice breaking up. You don't want to start that. So let me tell you a couple of other things. We're going to go to our deck, if it's available. Okay, I'll go to the first slide. We don't want to become used to or familiar with harmful behaviors or actions or attitudes. We don't want to let hurt and harm be a comfort zone. Everything that's for you is you have to believe in your heart that it's good and that you'll have it's reciprocal. You give love and blessings, you give care and compassion, and that you should receive it back. And if you're not receiving it back, it's not like, okay, well, hopefully he'll change if I do this. That's not a reciprocal relationship. So let's talk about the definition of domestic violence. Domestic violence is the willful intimidation, physical assault, battery, sexual assault, and or other abusive behavior as part of a systematic pattern of power and control. It's perpetrated by an intimate partner against another. I like the term intimate partner more than domestic violence because domestic violence just means who you live with. But there's people who you are intimate with, for instance, like a boyfriend. And it even goes beyond that. In your workplace, your boss can be abusive. Your landlord can be abusive if he's always or she is yelling at you. I mean, it's just not just between who you're intimately close with, but that's what we're just focusing on today. We're going to look at the different types of abuse that can occur. There's physical, sexual, verbal, threats and harassment, which goes with the mental. There's stalking, and a lot of people don't consider stalking a form of domestic violence. And with that, I need to add cyber stalking. Sometimes if you're on social media, you might have had that one weirdo. It's just like, who are you? I don't even know you, and sending you messages and things like that. And some of you might know the person, and you're like, I don't feel comfortable with this person. Block. If I pulled up my Facebook right now, that block list is long. I don't do that. So emotional abuse, isolation, like, oh no, you can't go to church today. You can't go to that women's meeting. Why? Because you're going to be empowered. And I don't want you empowered. I don't want you strengthened. No. So I'm going to isolate you. I'll isolate you from your family. Oh, all of a sudden I'm sick. You can't go to the family reunion. Why? Because I don't want you around your mama who's going to say, honey, I don't know about this man right here. And then it could go on to child abuse. If you have children and you're staying with a man who is unhealthy, harmful, abusive, or violent, eventually it's going to spill over to your children, and you have a responsibility to protect your babies. Financial abuse, withholding money, controlling money, no access to money. I'll give you an allowance and you a grown adult. Financial abuse. Or I abused you the night before, now you can't make it to work. Or I'll call you at work 100 times. Or you don't answer your phone, I'll call the main line and call the receptionist. I'll stop by a job. You know, and that will eventually lead to you losing your job. Homelessness is also a big factor that happens as a result of domestic violence. But this is also something that happens as a result of the woman recognizing and identifying domestic violence and leaving. And oftentimes women are afraid to leave because they don't want to be in a homeless situation, especially if the abuser controlled all the money. Okay, we'll go to the next slide. Here's some interesting facts, and I believe I might be running out of time, so I'm going to go through a couple of them. Okay. All right, so let's go through the first fact. Intimate partner violence is most common among women between the ages of 18 to 24. Did you know that? So we're talking about high school, college. And when you think about that group, and you think about, okay, this is really the time when they're out on their own to make their own judgment calls about their relationships and no longer under their parents' wing. 1 in 3 women have experienced some form of physical violence by an intimate partner within their lifetime. So perspective, every third woman. That's huge. On average, nearly 20 people per minute are victims of physical violence by an intimate partner in the U.S. So during our time together, can you imagine how many women have been abused? 1, and that should say in, not and, 1 in 7 women have experienced stalking, victimization during their lifetime in which they felt very fearful or believed that they or someone close to them will be harmed or killed. 79% of female victims of completed rape report that they were first raped before the age of 25. That's re-victimization. That's that low self-esteem that says, okay, well, I can't speak up for myself. I can't say no to this person in terms of, okay, I see some warning signs, I'm gonna stay with him. Or it's I'm around people who are unhealthy for me and they turn a blind eye. And rape is something, especially with this college age, is really serious because they'll have a big party and in another room somebody's being raped. So all those people in that party are ignoring the fact of what's going on in there. So we have to really understand, how serious and how widespread domestic violence is. And although we see things on the news, those, and in no way minimizing those situations at all, but they're right in our neighborhood. If you live in an apartment and you hear screaming next door, that's domestic violence. If you're in a grocery store and you see some things, it's right in front of us. But because we don't have that awareness or that understanding of what it is, we turn a blind eye unknowingly. Maybe some sisters here may have experienced domestic violence or may be in the midst of experiencing domestic violence. And what it does, it gives you a fear. And that's that word unlikely that I was trying to tell you about earlier. And I pulled up the definition of unlikely. And I just want to read it to you because it's what you begin to believe after being broken down so much. The definition of unlikely is something that is probably not going to happen or that has a very slim chance of occurring. After you've been abused, you believe it's unlikely to ever be loved again. You just believe it. And that's when your self-esteem just diminishes and you have no more fight in you. That's when you know you're being abused and there's children in the other room and you don't leave. So when that word unlikely comes into your mind or into your heart, how do you combat it? What do you do? Well, in the beginning, I said that abuse is really a misunderstanding of what love is. And love, I repeat that, God is love. It says that in 1 John chapter 4. And if you don't know God, you don't know love. It's that simple. So if the person that you're with has no relationship with God for himself, what does he have to give to you? You're to love others as you love yourself. So initially, when you're dating or first meeting someone, it should be, well, how much do you love yourself? It's not about what you can give to me right now. It's how I can see the example of love in your life right now, because we're not going to grow into love. I need you to know love right now. And I'm not going to be able to teach you, because that's a personal relationship with God. I could go on this journey with you in terms of spiritual growth, but I need you to know who God is. The Bible says in Proverbs 4:23, above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it. If you're allowing abuse in your life, and by saying allowing, I mean if you've been abused by someone and you're staying in that relationship knowing that you've been abused by that person, you have to step back and say, how much do I love myself? Because we can't put this relationship that's hurtful and harmful before yourself. You have to first love yourself in order to give love. You have a deposit in your own heart that you need to build up before you go with someone else and try to establish a relationship with them. But if you haven't identified that yet, and if you haven't established that, and you go to somebody else expecting them to fill you up with love, and then they have their own definition of love, that puts you in a predicament that could be very dangerous. Do you see what I'm saying? So don't let the lies of abuse come into your heart and come into your mind. Don't let it sit there and grow and be this big tree with roots. Know what love is and share that with your sisters. Can you go to the next slide? A big part of awareness and a big part of sharing the love that you've learned today is going out and speaking to someone. Just say, hey, I just want you to know this is what we discussed today. This is what I learned about relationships today. And it really just struck me. Maybe this is something new. Maybe this is something that was reiterated. A family member, a neighbor, a friend. But if you know someone who has low self-esteem, share something with them that you heard today. And it could prevent them from being in a relationship that can harm them. I want to close with one final thing. As a result of being a foster child, I, in my heart and mind, really, really felt like I was unlovable. I really felt like, well, that's it for me. That's it. But what opened my eyes, honestly, that I could go on and go and move forward in life was the love that I received from my sisters. I'm talking about young, old. I'm talking about my foster moms. I'm talking about my girlfriends from elementary school. Find a support. Find someone that you can talk to. Talk to the church mothers. Reach out to them and say, hey, if you're not in one, but if you have been one in the past and you want to link up with somebody for prayer, and you want to talk to somebody and just hash it out and cry and say, this happened to me and I never was able to say anything about it to anyone. Remember, 1 in 3. It's very likely, but maybe you just brushed it off. Get a support. There's plenty of women here who love you. I love you. I'll be here to talk. I have plenty more in my story, but I don't want to bore you. So I just want to thank you for having me, First Lady and Pastor Donna. They have beautiful hearts for women, and I just want to thank you.